I'm Jim Czek.
I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot. We're here every week with some of the best political breakdown on the internet and growing an audience every day. So if you could like and subscribe and share, we would appreciate it. We got lots to talk about in this episode, but obviously we're going to start off with Mark Carney, like the long anticipated. They really build it up though, right? Like there's a big build up, 7 more projects for approval, and including mines, LNG, and hydro. And then it seems to fizzle. Like, you know, when they deliver, it's just like that big anticipation. I remember like a Pepsi commercial, anticipation, and then it just, nothing.
Well, and I have to, I'll credit this government and credit their communications people because honestly, they've done a great job of the budget and of these projects, of forecasting, of telling what they will see and what they want them to see. So, you know, they're definitely doing a great job of getting their messaging out there and repeating before it kind of comes to fruition. This was a little bit anticlimactic, I have to be honest. I was expecting, especially after the interview that Carney did last week following the budget, I was expecting that there would be a pipeline somewhere, somehow in all of this, and it did not come to fruition. It wasn't there. It wasn't even mentioned. I'll say that most of these are already projects that are underway, that are stuck in processes that have been created by this government or by provincial governments. It makes no sense to tout these as the ones that you're going to be moving forward on when they are already moving forward and they are stuck. You know, I take the LNG second phase. That one's been sitting at financial investment or final investment decision, or FID as they call it, for probably 2 years now. The environmental's already been done. All of the planning's already been done, and right now it's not making sense for them to move forward, largely because the electrification aspects and how they're actually going to power this plant is not appropriate yet. So, you know, why he's touting these ones as, you know, these big projects for Canada, it really doesn't make sense. I have watched some of the economists kind of lapping it up and saying, yes, this is going to add to jobs and these are great projects. They would have always added to jobs and they would have always been great projects, but these are not new projects. And I don't want any of our viewers to be confused. These are all existing projects that have been on the books for years and years and years, and he should just get moving forward on them. I will say this, you know, the one thing that I'm watching pretty carefully, and that Jim, you and I've talked about ad nauseum, is that, you know, he really needed to create a vision forward for Canada. I think he's doing that. I think that is really the point of these projects. It's not really to get them moving forward, but it is to kind of say we are going to move forward with energy projects, because most of these are either in the mining sector or in the natural gas sector. There's not a lot of big infrastructure like bridges or highways. This is just really energy projects. So is he trying to, you know, recreate Canada as that energy superpower? Perhaps, is what I'll say, perhaps.
But it doesn't live up to the billing, and that's the part that I have trouble with. It doesn't live up to the hype of this, you know, like nation-building projects. These are already, and they go, one energy analyst really did a good job of it. He says, like, it's like releasing hostages, and these projects have been held hostage by the Liberals for, like, we talk about the Sissons mine. I mean, in 2017, they were celebrating the Sissons mine. Like, it's been held hostage for, and we could go through project after project where we talk about Frontier, where Teck walked away after $1 billion investment in the tar sands there. And when do these hostages get released, right? And that's what it seems like, you know what I mean? This is like you say, a lot of these have been on the books, and he's not even saying these are going forward. These have been moved, kind of like just moved along the line into the project's office. This is really, it's almost like we're announcing a meeting to have a meeting. We're announcing a project that will move on to the next phase of the project in the project office, and there's already pushback on some of these. There's already pushback from groups that don't want the LNG, which is the biggest one in this thing. Let's be fair. That LNG one is the plum in this pile here, because the rest of them are just like, you know, I mean, especially the hydro project is, you know, like it's a community-based hydro project, doesn't really say much. The Sissons mine one, again, 2017, the release of a hostage, the release of an energy hostage, right? And that is, I think that's a fair assessment. The guy did a really good job in saying that, and he's an energy analyst, and saying, like, you know, like Canada's been held hostage. Our energy sector has been held hostage, and Danielle Smith has said that over and over and over again, right? Danielle Smith. Yeah. And that's what I expected. I thought Mr. Magician was going to pull a rabbit out of the hat and say, here's your oil pipeline. At least move it into the project's office. But nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is the one. Supposedly Sunday's the deadline, too, for the MOU.
Yeah, and you know, you said it maybe a little bit punchier than what I communicated it, but you're right. Like, these are projects that are already underway. These are all already you know, at decision making points, and are not financially feasible for a number of reasons. One being, you know, we've been touting this emissions cap that nobody knew exactly how that was going to affect. There's also the industrial carbon tax. There's the provincial environmental constraints that are being put onto these projects, and none of that is being moved forward. None of that's getting out of the way. None of that is actually changing. So what is being done here? It's very unclear, other than a lot of announcements, a lot of you know, air, but not really a whole lot of action or activity. So the proof will be in the pudding. And you're right. You know, for projects like Sissons, that's been underway for the last 8 years now and slated to be starting any moment. Yeah, the release of hostages is a great way to put it.
And then Stephanie Kuzi, an MP there, put out just like, you know, basically no pipeline oil on Carney's major project list, and that's 12 now, right? Because there was 5 in the first announcement. Again, that one didn't live up to the expectations either. All of those 5 were all like in advanced stages of being completed. I mean,
some of them were actually in construction already, like they're already building permits.
Yeah. The nuclear plant, I mean, that's a long process, and that is close to going online. So, I mean, a lot of these were just, you know, and some of them were additions to mines and that. So, I mean, they basically shuffled around in the closet there and found some stuff that was already ongoing. So these are a little bit different, but again, a lot of buildup and not a lot of delivery. And hopefully he's got something to pull out of the hat. But what concerns me is in the budget, and we talked about it, Ian and I for sure, on the, if you read the budget, I think there's a Trojan horse in there, and that Trojan horse is the emissions cap. They're talking about, they kind of sold it out there. We're going to remove the emissions cap, and it's going to get replaced with carbon credits, right? Carbon capture. And carbon capture seems to be almost, now it's getting more frequent. You see, before it was kind of dripped out there, and everything now seems to be there. Carbon capture is more talked about all the time. Tim Hodgson celebrated that one American company that came to Alberta to set up shop, because they said that they couldn't operate in the US anymore because they took away all the climate credits. And they're coming to Alberta for 60%. Those are those super credits Carney talks about, 60% from the feds. And I think Alberta's topping it up with about 15. So 75% they're going to reach into the taxpayer's pocket to pay for their project, 75% tax credits, and then have the ability to sell those credits to our energy companies. Basically a tax, right? It's kind of one of the best schemes ever. These companies are going to be able to come to Canada, and some of them might be Canadian companies. Pathways is one of them. And they're going to be able to tax our energy companies. It's basically, that's how the whole scheme works.
Yeah, and this is similar to what's happening in our EVs as well, right? Like, and with the EV mandate, with this, you know, forced EV credit that all the car companies require, what's happening is that they're buying them from Tesla. So Tesla is profiting off of not selling cars, but selling their EV numbers to these companies. And it's making it so expensive that and it's making it more expensive to buy all vehicles because now those car companies have to actually, you know, recover that cost in some way, shape, or form. So again, you know, this form of taxation on our oil and gas companies is not going to make it less expensive, is not going to make us more competitive. It's actually going to decrease our competitiveness on a global scale and make it more difficult for companies to come in and do business, which is exactly why some of these companies are sitting on the sidelines. They've got the planning completed. They've got the environmental check mark. But what's happening is that it's with all the other bureaucracy and with all the other forms of taxation that is happening and forms of green taxation that's happening, they simply can't move forward in a meaningful way.
And Carney keeps saying, that this is what's going to be demanded from the world. And then the question that the reporters aren't asking is like, well, how did the Americans sign South Korea, Japan, and Germany to LNG? And they don't have any carbon capture, carbon credits. They have zero of that. And they signed our deals. All three of those all countries came to us, and we didn't take them because there was no business case. But now we're going to sell this clean LNG, which, just for the fact, and there is no difference in the oil and LNG. There is no difference. They're not doing anything to the oil and LNG. There's no cleaning of it. They're just saying they're cleaning something over here. It's kind of like the Tesla thing. They're cleaning something over here and then adding it to that and say, oh, it's cleaner because it's the same, but because we took some carbon off over here. Something a tree does.
Yeah, and what's really ironic to me is that you're right, Jim. It's not cleaner LNG. It's just that company had to pay to clean something else. There's also a whole bunch of questions about carbon capture and whether or not it actually does what it says it's supposed to do, and how do you quantify that?
You can monitor it.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of hinkiness when it comes to that aspect of it. But really, just getting LNG off of our border and to other countries like India or China would help to lower their overall global emissions footprint. So why we wouldn't already consider that clean, and why we would need to actually introduce carbon capture in the first place, is really a mystery to me. And that's where you and I, have talked, and even after the budget came out, I know we were texting back and forth about and you said, see, I told you so. There it is, in the budget, the carbon capture. And isn't it convenient that Brookfield is one of the biggest suppliers?
19 times, I think it was in there. And we pulled up on today's show, the really big show, you can go watch it. We pulled up Brookfield Renewables, which is another Brookfield company, and you can look at the stock sliding because, as the world moved away from climate hysteria, because even Bill Gates has now said that, we can move on. The stock sliding, and then somebody gets elected, and all of a sudden that stock is really relevant. And if you go and do a search, not that I want to put a tinfoil hat on, do a search, carbon credits, Brookfield, you're going to find that company has invested billions and billions and billions of dollars in technology called carbon capture. Imagine that. Yeah.
So is it true? Is it not true? I will let the fact checkers go through and figure that out. What I will say is, I don't like thinking about it. I don't like thinking about whether or not my prime minister has a conflict of interest. And I think that even the fact that Brookfield wouldn't send their executives and their CEO to come and have a conversation with the committee, I think that is very, very suspect. And I think it again signals that they don't really take our parliamentary process very seriously. So, to deny a subpoena is a pretty big offense. And I think that we need to all really think about why they would feel so emboldened to do so.
Well, you don't even need a subpoena. You can go on their website, because they're a publicly traded company, and you look at their investor deck, and there it is going to be in there. Carbon capture is one of the biggest components in there. So, it's pretty much out there and open. And then if you go and look at his stock holdings, again, there's a really good piece on there by Scott Bessett. He was on, I believe, MSNBC, I believe. And they asked him about, how well he did in the stock market. He said, they say, oh, you must have done well in the stock market. He says, well, I sold all my stocks. They said, oh, no, you must put it in a blind trust. He said, there's no such thing as a blind trust when you take on the job of Treasury Secretary. You have to sell everything. And they're just like, oh. He said, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a blind trust. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a comfortable position for Canadians, but I think that what Carney and what anyone who is associated with Brookfield is hoping is that it's too complicated for the citizens to actually understand. And if it's too complicated and not retail enough, the opposition leaders will kind of back away slowly from it because they can't really get answers and they can't really get clarity. And if it can't be clear to them, and if they can't be clear to, the mainstream media, it's going to be very difficult for the general public to understand it as well.
And here's a common sense way to look at it, though. If we have both us and the Americans have LNG at Tidewater, if we have LNG at Tidewater, Mark Carney could have a good case for selling carbon capture if the South Koreans said, you know what, we'll take Canada's LNG instead because it has carbon credits instead of the Americans. But that's not the case.
Yeah, and you raised a good point earlier, Jim. Like, the question to Carney is, tell me where. Tell me where. Who is demanding this clean LNG? Because I don't see it. I see them wanting LNG, and I see them wanting LNG from countries that are politically safe, but there's not an advantage and there's not a premium for any of that LNG. So when you're a company that's deploying capital, are you really going to go to LNG, Canada and build out that phase two, or are you going to go to Venezuela where you can get it done much less expensively? Maybe
well,
not.
The Europeans are putting in a form of like carbon credits. They are, but guess what the exception is for carbon credits?
LNG.
Energy. No, energy in general. And guess where they buy their energy right now?
Russia. The U.S.
Russia. Oh, Russia. And I'm sure Putin is saying, yeah, here's our carbon credits. No, he's not. Right?
No, he's not. But he most definitely is not.
So here's the thing. Even though, like, putting the emissions cap and the carbon credits aside, the bigger roadblock is the Tidewater. And let's listen to what Mr. Eby has to say.
It is no surprise to me that there is no heavy oil pipeline on this list because there is no route, there is no proponent, there is no project. It is a figment of a communication person's mind in Alberta, and it has no connection to real investment in our country or in our province. If it goes ahead, it will only be because it is fully funded by taxpayers to the tune of $40 to $50 billion. And we already have a publicly owned pipeline that is not operating at capacity and could take on significant additional capacity. I remain frustrated that this appears to be an ongoing issue for Premier Smith. We've got so many things to work on together that could make a meaningful difference for her province and ours, whether it's around electricity rates in Alberta, whether it's around access to Tidewater for key products, whether it's around just working closely together as each other's major trading partners in Canada. So the door remains open, but let's be honest with ourselves, that pipeline is not happening, and that's why it's not on the list.
Go Team Canada.
Yeah, I mean, Eby is not telling the whole truth or even the truth. It is not going to be taxpayer owned. Smith has made that very clear. So it will only go forward if there is a proponent, a company proponent. And right now we need to signal that we're open for business. So Smith is on the right track in terms of really pushing forward and making sure that there's that political will. Eby is sabotaging a pipeline by simply saying no. And the reality is that Carney would have to step in and make that a national issue and a national sovereignty issue. So Eby is fear mongering, saying it's going to cost taxpayers $40 to $50 billion. He is also not completely accurate on the Trans Mountain and how it's at capacity or not at capacity. It is cranking right now. That has been proven. It is thoroughly contributing to our GDP by the tune of 0.25%. So that is an absolute only thing that is actually pulling us out of any sort of recession right now, or forcing us to not be in worse recession. His rhetoric is getting very tired.
It reminds me of that movie. You're probably too young for it, Catch-22, where basically the environment is the investment climate is, well, remove all these blockades from us investing, and we'll invest. And Eby's making sure there's enough there, and he's saying, well, they won't. Nobody's investing. Well, obviously, because you keep putting roadblocks in it. So it's just like Catch-22. So he's making sure that there's enough blockades in there or uncertainty that why would somebody put up billions of dollars if they know they're going to, as soon as they get to the BC coastline, that they're going to get kiboshed.
Yeah, and this is a dangerous game because there are other access points for our oil and gas. It just happens to be to the U.S. it either has to go north to Anchorage or to Alaska, or it's going to go south and to a Keystone pipeline. If either of those even starts to move forward, then that the economics and the reality of the economics makes sense, and really it's about BC getting iced out of any sort of that GDP growth simply because we have a premier who said no.
And again, the number one export for Canada, right? That's oil.
Oil. Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, if Canada wants prosperity.
The other thing I'll talk about his speech there is pretty rich to say that he wants to talk about Alberta's electricity prices, considering how much we actually purchase from them. So maybe he's complaining about how much we actually have to buy from them, but the reality is that they produce more than what they need and they sell it to others. So it's definitely part of what we purchase. And if you look at that list that came out of where the different provinces are compared to the states, Alberta is much higher than BC on that list. So apparently her citizens in Alberta aren't complaining as much about their electricity costs because the rest of the cost of living is so much lower.
Everybody should better do a little bit of education, because Alberta is Canada's Saudi Arabia in a vast diversity of energy. And that is the truth. It is the golden goose that gets treated like the ugly stepsister, because not only does it have LNG and oil, which is their two major exports right now, those two things, but it also has the ability to put SMRs into play. It has that ability. It is the best place for solar, and they have quite a few solar farms that are running FinTech right now. It also has some of the windiest. I lived in Alberta. It has some of the windiest areas. It also has geothermal. It has coal. It has so many. It has the most vast and diverse energy mix in Canada. It is our Saudi Arabia. So it's time to try treating it with respect.
Absolutely, unequivocally, and we hopefully will do better on making sure that trade partnership is moving on all cylinders.
We got a little bit more here from Mark Carney here.
Yeah. Kind of gather from Dogwood News, following up on this question. So, as it stands, Western LNG is the owner of the Xilisms terminal, and it would be built in Korea with Korean and Chinese steel. So how much taxpayer money are we prepared to invest in a project that is American-owned and foreign-built?
There are different aspects of the project, as I said. There is the PRGT pipeline, which is necessary, which is Canadian-owned First Nation. Sorry, can I finish? There is the associated transmission line that comes there. There are structures that come with projects that ensure that there is returns to taxpayers through the tax system as well. And the structure of the financing is a decision that we take with the full information of the project design. So that's part of. We answer that question with full information by doing the work, and that's what the referral to the major project office facilitates.
So if you were keeping track of what the question was, how much taxpayer dollars are going into this? I didn't hear an answer.
No, and the other part of that question is how much tax dollars are going to Korea and Chinese steel.
And then still to answer Ferry's question.
When we're trying desperately to actually utilize Canadian steel, because right now it's being tariffed to a very large extent by our partners to the south.
And then this is we did a piece yesterday outlining, just as an example of we used Marco Rubio answering questions for about an hour, and you ask a question, you get a straight answer. You ask a question, you get a straight answer. With Mark Carney and many politicians, you don't get a straight answer. Like, he didn't answer the question. He made it seem like your eyes would glaze over, and the reporter's like, I don't, was that an answer? I don't know what that was.
Yeah.
Right?
And it seems like the reporter was actually trying to redefine the question, and he puts his hand up. I find yeah, this is a word salad. He's great at word salads that say nothing and that end up not, just causing confusion and a little bit of a form of gaslighting, because the other part that he didn't talk about was all of those other structures. What's the order of magnitude on those other structures versus the order of magnitude of the Chinese and Korean steel that we're going to be using and manufacturing in Korea?
Apparently, we must like Chinese steel.
Apparently.
Ferries are being done there as well, and that question is yet to be asked that I've seen an answer where we've taken just over $1 billion of infrastructure money, the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, and funded it, and also, I think the BC government is footing another couple $1 billion to build ferries in China.
Yeah. And again, I mean, we've talked about this and why it's so unsettling. I'm surprised that Canadians are not more upset about this. I did see some polling that was done around this, and they were saying, well, yeah, we're not really that concerned. We want the best price. But the reality is that this is a huge canary in the coal mine. This is a signal, whether it's this Korean and Chinese steel that's part of this LNG plant, or whether it's the Chinese steel that's going to be used to make ferries, and a $4 billion contract, for China to build our ferries. The reality is we are not competitive on a global scale. And when we don't have competitiveness, it's up to this liberal federal government to actually make us competitive. And we're not. And instead of tackling that, he's making justifications for why we're okay with using, foreign steel in our projects and foreign, makers for our pipes and ferries. That's just wrong. And, we should be spending all of our taxpayer dollars to make us more competitive and to make us more, prosperous. And that's not what's happening with this federal or provincial government.
Well, you talk about price competitiveness. How do we compete with a country that can have human rights violations with labor? Can you do what they do? Can you in your company? Can you do that? No, you're not allowed. Do they have an industrialized carbon tax? No. So how do you compete? And also, can you use inferior products in your building? Can you do that?
No.
So how do you compete? And then when people say that, they're just like, well, it's cheaper. Yeah, there's a reason it's cheaper, right? So is that what we're doing for Canada? Is that it? Because that's the answer then, right? If we're allowed to do that. But here's a real GDP capita growth in the OECD, and this is something that, we'll go to the next one there. And no, next one, sorry. There you go. There's Canada, the little red one on the bottom there. There you go. Just keep it up.
Yeah. And for me, this is a scary graph. You look at all of the other countries that are listed there. Some of them would surprise the readership. I wish that everyone could see them. I can't read all of them. But really, we shouldn't be at the bottom. We are Saudi Arabia. We have so much energy. We should be at the top of this list. But our GDP per capita has been absolutely abysmal. Our investment dollars has been fleeing the country, and that is all policy related, and it is all government related. It has nothing to do with access or availability of our resources. It all has to do with the policies that have been put in place that have rendered us dead in the water and not competitive on a global scale.
Well, liberal spin would say we are double our GDP per capita of Luxembourg.
Yeah, that is not high praise. That's like saying BC has a better economy than the Maritimes. Not a high bar.
No, that's the thing, right? You can spin any stat you want to spin. Pierre Poilievre was in town yesterday, and he was here speaking at the, it was a chamber event. The Kelowna Chamber of Commerce announced it, sold it out within hours, and they were actually looking for a bigger venue. And I know this from people that I know. And then the next thing you know, the next morning, it was canceled. And then the executive director went on extended leave. And then so a lot of people are asking the question is, what happened? And then the Poilievre's team picked it up and held it anyway at the Capri Center.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I'll just say like it was a health emergency from the executive director, and that is the only reason that they canceled it, was just that they didn't have the capacity to put it on. Those take a tremendous amount of staff time, and with his very abrupt departure, there wasn't enough time to reroute it. So I'm really happy that they still carried it on, and it sounds like it was a packed house as well.
Yeah, and we live streamed it. We did ask for an interview. We were turned down, and I said no questions from media. Media was allowed to attend to take photos, and so we attended and did the video live stream. We live streamed it, and then Ian and I did some analysis after the event. And I think Jeff Stibbard from JDS Mining, I think, sponsored the event, so he was the fireside chat guy, and. You know, you can go watch the analysis. I mean, I won't bore you with all of it. But one of the key things, I think, one of the questions I don't think was asked maybe in the right way, but one of the key questions is how do you convince the boomers to vote for you next time, if there's a next time? And I just don't think he answered that question the way he needs to answer that question. I think he needs to answer that in a very convincing, compelling way with compassion, because he needs to get through to the boomers, because they're the ones watching CBC, and they're transfixed and hypnotized by Carney's word salad. So, like, how do you get through? He needs to find a way to break through.
Yeah, and I would say that Carney might do some of that work for him, because Carney's government is running this massive deficit, and I've heard a lot of talk about trying to quell demand for housing. And one of the ways to do that is through a capital gains tax. Now, with a minority government, maybe he won't do that, like a capital gains tax on primary residences. So maybe he won't do that, and maybe he will, kind of keep that off the table. But I would say that, what Pierre has to start talking to is find something in each of the demographics that was really attractive, and something that Carney can't really emulate. That's the most difficult part of this, is that, someone said to me yesterday, I was in Vancouver, and someone said, oh yeah, well, look at Carney's like gone so far to the middle. Like he took, the Trudeau government from the far left and has moved it to the middle. I said, well, I wouldn't necessarily call $100 billion or $78 billion deficit the middle. But I would say that he's trying to focus some of those dollars on productivity and on investments for businesses, and trying to bake into the tax policy some of what was already in play by means of or mechanisms of short-term investments would have been counted for full depreciation values, but now that's going to be baked into the tax law. I would say that he's doing some of that. I think that Pierre, though, I mean, one of the ones that he needs to start kind of asking to advocate for him is the younger generation. Yeah. I know that, my kids who want to, who's very impacted by Pierre's message. Even my far left kids are very impacted by Pierre's message, because they're frustrated that they can't afford to buy a house, and they don't feel like they can afford to save or live or have children, etc. So I do know that the conversations around our dinner tables with grandparents, etc., is often that conversation of, hey, we can't afford it anymore. And it's really because, of government policy. So I do think that there are some advocates in that next generation, but I think we have to get, I think he does not resonate well with women, and he does not resonate well with the boomer crowd.
Well, I've got a couple of freebies for him, and I think these would be really good. I had Cassie DeVere in here from the Canadian Home Builder Supply, and she said that the housing plan misses the mark, especially for first-time home buyers. So I think this is a double-edged one for him. Number one, take all tax off of CPP. No tax on CPP for everybody. And that's being done in the US with great fanfare. No tax on CPP. Like the seniors have paid enough. And then the second one is allow seniors in their RSPs to take money out of their RSP tax-free and loan it to their children to buy a house. Allow them to take it out tax-free, loan that money to their children for the down payment, allow them to take it out tax-free. Because the biggest nut to crack for first-time homebuyers is that down payment. Most of them are paying, their rent is equal to their mortgage payment. The nut they can't crack is the down payment. Allow, because they got to collapse these rifts too, and then all of a sudden all this taxation. If they're allowed to shift that and turn that into a loan, which would still be a loan, or maybe it's a longer payout loan or whatever, allow them, or even allow them to gift it to their kids out of their RSP and allow that to fall into a down payment, oh my, would we stoke some investment in building in this country.
Yeah, and I think, both the Canadian Home Builders Association as well as UDI came out with such grim and grave disappointment over the budget. That next generation is not going to see anything by way of stimulation of housing. I will put it this way. I don't know if I mind that very much because the federal government shouldn't really be involved in housing. Although the one thing I think they should have put in were the MURBs. I think that is fully within their purview and has been seen to be successful in past history. So to stimulate, investment back into housing, I would have probably said, that's the one ask I would have had. I do like your ideas though, Jim. I think that's very smart. And if you allowed anyone that was over 65 to take their RRSP and put it into, a first-time home builders,
the kids, would they put it in their kids? Yeah.
Under their kids' names, I think that would be brilliant, and just be allowed to transfer that tax-free, I think would be absolutely.
Takes the government out of the equation as well, right? The government's no longer in the middle of it. We have home builders that specialize in home building. Actually, Cassie said right now, this no GST on first-time home buyers has actually slowed it down because it hasn't reached ascension yet. So everybody's waiting, so nobody's doing anything, right? So it's actually grounded to a halt. So not good. We got a couple big things left here, and I do want to get to them. PBO, the one that came out was shocking, stupefying, unsustainable, that we're standing at the edge of a cliff and looking into the abyss, and what we see there is not good. Now it sounds like they're looking for a replacement because he doesn't have enough tact.
Yeah, parliamentary budget officer, I think he's done an amazing job. I think he's outstanding. When he did that interview at committee, I actually reached out to a couple of my Ottawa friends and said, like, is he quitting? And I asked that question because if he's not quitting, this is definitely a swan song. Like, this is definitely he's looking to get fired, because these are appointed positions by the government of the day. So this is within Carney's purview. This looks really bad, though. Carney's decision here looks really bad. To look for a replacement for the only person that seems to be,
holding him to account.
Holding him accountable. It's not a good look, and it's not gonna wear well. I think that the Conservatives are waiting to have him actually make that decision. But right now, even in the media, it's not resonating with the general public in a good way.
Do you remember when Donald Trump fired the statistician in the United States for cooking having bad numbers, and they said it was a threat to democracy, he's ruining the whole financial system, this can't happen, Donald Trump. This is worse. This is absolutely worse. And where's the media? Where's the media screaming? Where's the CPA Society? I'm a CPA as well, as is Jason Jacques. Where are they screaming? How dare you call this guy to account when he's just, and I've seen many other CPAs say it as well, including the Ontario Business Association, I think the Chamber of Commerce, all saying this budget, things like ridiculous, unsustainable, and he's doing his job. And to be fired, I will want to see the outlets, CBC and CTV, go after Mark Carney like they went after Trump, which doesn't even exist in our country, over him firing a statistician in the United States.
Yeah, again, our mainstream media are very biased. It is very difficult for me to even watch them. They are so biased. It is very one-sided. The stories that they run and the way that they tell the story is very one-sided. That's the best way I can put it, and definitely in favor of the Carney government. It's like they've got rose-colored glasses and they'll do anything to keep him in power. But that's also because they've been threatened. The funding for CBC has been threatened to be taken away if they don't, if they have a different government. So is it survival? Maybe, but is it a good policy? No. And am I happy about it? Absolutely not. And what I would encourage people to do is just watch different make sure you go to Kelowna now and get, more accurate reads on these stories, because it's really important to make sure that we have the whole story and not just one side.
Bob Rae, retiring as Canada's UN ambassador, coming out and saying, we won't play it just in the interest of time, but you can go watch it yourself, calling the United States a deadbeat dad for not coughing up more money. And and I don't know why they keep poking the bear, because the UN was created by the Americans, funded by the Americans, everything by the Americans. If they leave, there ain't going to be any UN for you to be at, Bob Rae. And then the other side of it, if the Americans are the deadbeat dad, what are the Canadians in? Are we the sugar daddy? Because if we look at, there's a couple stories we did yesterday when Justin Trudeau was trying to become, he was trying to buy a job at the UN there and the UN Nation Security Council when he spent $6.2 billion there. This was in from Holly Jones yesterday. When he was trying to get a job there with his tick box exercise. We spent so much money there with the UN so that we can put up the next slide there. With Justin Trudeau and the Liberals there trying to get Justin appointment there on the UN Security Council.
Yeah, and I would say that we're the foolhardy boyfriend or suitor that spend a lot of money but didn't actually get the date, because that's what ended up happening. It's a foolish way to spend taxpayer dollars. And I mean, I hope that people are upset about this. Like 6.2 billion is not chump change for us. It's significant. And when we have a government that spends money in this manner, it's every one of that $6.2 is out of our pockets and out of our economy, and is not going towards seeing our prosperity come to fruition. So it's very upsetting indeed.
The big story I want to get to, because I don't know how much time we have left. We have a couple minutes here, but I interviewed Jeff Moyse yesterday, and I do have a small clip to play, and we're talking about the Cowichan land decision and the way that Premier Eby is dealing with this stuff, all this stuff under the cover of darkness. And he said something, around the 39-minute mark there that I just want to play a small clip here for you first.
Well, when the Minister of Indigenous Relations relays publicly that he had no idea that government lawyers had been instructed to go in and support the Haida in getting a declaration of Aboriginal title from the court on September the 4th, when the minister didn't have a clue, I think that indicates that probably this entire machinery of quote unquote reconciliation is being run entirely from the Premier's office.
So do you think David Eby is the architect behind all this stuff, and only a few people know the direction of where we're going?
Our pans are not cheap, and they're not supposed to be.
Okay. Sorry.
I have sort of personal knowledge that there have been several advisors in the Premier's office with both the Horgan government and the Eby government who have a pretty vested interest in seeing this UNDRIP stuff advance. And that's all I'll say. I mean, but these are people of high influence, and they are people who have written in the past about wanting to cause social chaos. Reconciliation won't be reconciliation unless there's pain. So, I can't go further than that, but it's very worrisome.
That's good.
Yeah, and I've talked about this in the past. One of the advisors to Eby is Doug White III. You can Google him. You can look up some of his white papers. He is very much on that path and a proponent of this. He believes in a collapse of government. He believes in a collapse of land title, and that, from this collapse, there will emerge a new utopia in which, Indigenous reign will be supreme. that just simply is foolhardy, and it's, it denies our democracy. It is undemocratic, and it would have to be operated in an undemocratic manner to be to actually get a democratic nation and a democratic people to agree with it. I think one of the issues here is that nobody has agreed to this. This is not our definition of reconciliation. But laws have been put in place where, now our justices are concluding that this is what reconciliation means. And I think we're in a very dangerous place and a very dangerous path. And, where all land title is at question, and, as to who actually could come and take your property from you.
I'd recommend people go watch that. Jeff Moyes, I think that's my 4th interview with him. He's been working for the government here for, I think, through 6 different governments as well, Aboriginal law, and he's worked on many of the treaties that have been settled. 31 years with the government. Now he's 2 more years on private practice here doing this stuff, and he's trying to educate the public as to what's going on. Very generous in sharing his time and educating. I mean, he doesn't have an axe to grind with any government in particular, but he says what you can do is get a hold of your MLA and said we need to get out of the UNDRIP and DRIPA. And this is a UN thing. This has nothing to do with our Constitution. This is something that the NDP and the Liberals have elected to do.
Yes, and even when the Liberals or the NDP, were taking it through the Legislative Assembly, they gave assurances that it would not affect land title. It would not affect, individual title holders, and the justice is using that as one of the rationale for why it does. So clearly, they were either misinformed or misled, or chose to mislead the House in what they were saying about what DRIPA was going to do and what it wasn't going to do.
Yeah, again, this is a serious thing, and I did interview Brenda Bailey, the finance minister here for the NDP, and asked her too about the uncertainty this causes and investment capital. And you and I have talked about this a long time. I think you and I talked about it before anybody else talked about the giant sucking sound that is happening here in Canada, and the capital flees. And this is just another reason for capital to find better ground, like safer spaces, sunnier climates, or whatever you want to call it, that they find more certainty. And right now, BC, even with his stance on the pipeline, it's all causes uncertainty, right? Like, would you invest, if you're Enbridge, would you invest billions and billions of dollars if you know that it's just going to be an uphill battle? Like, look at how long the Sissons project, just for an example, the Sissons project has finally been released as a hostage, and it's not done. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like that. If you listen to that energy analyst and you listen to Daniel Smith, they've been held hostage for how long, with different types of regulations, Bill C5, 69, all these different regulations. And then if you listen to what Ian had to say today, C5 gives ultimate power to Mark Carney, right? And we're not going to get rid of those other things. We're going to select who we're going to bless that they can move their project ahead, instead of removing it so that we can have the free enterprise do it, right? You wouldn't want that in the housing industry, would you? Cripple all the housing industries and then bless 1 or 2 different companies? Wouldn't be fair.
Yeah. And, to that certainty piece, I mean, this Cowichan case, someone said to me, well, we'll have to see how it plays out. And I stopped them right there and I said, no. This has already played out. This has played out. There is a decision. And that decision will remain in effect, until, in perpetuity. And so, is the government asking for a stay? Perhaps, but it doesn't really matter. That's still going to increase uncertainty until the appeal is done. So I think that I know for a fact that there are already, investment dollars that are being pulled out of BC. I know that, even from a housing perspective, the president and CEO of Canadian Home Builders Association was in town today, and he had the article yesterday where he basically was saying that what is going on in BC, like, that is what everyone is scratching their heads and going, what are you guys doing? This is really not boding well for you. And I think that Pandora's box has been opened, and how it plays out is going to be very, very important for British Columbians over the course of this next while. I mean, there's a situation where we could have, according to the decision in the Cowichan case, Indigenous title trumps overrides our own land title.
And Eleanor Sturko came out and said too that this stuff happening behind closed doors needs to stop. Rustad said the same thing. I do have Mario Canseco later today.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about who's the favorite to replace John Rustad. I know John Rustad's not going to like to hear that, but that's what we're going to talk about. Who has the better results there.
Well,
and,
our own do is one of those.
Yeah. And then Jonathan Kay was in town, and you got to watch him. He spoke at the I think the Mary Irwin Theatre there, and he said that too. What you just said, as bad as Canada is, look at BC and say, "Wow, what are you guys doing over there?" And he also said that about our parties. He said you got the NDP living in La La Land, and you got the Conservatives in complete chaos.
They are, and John needs to go. John needs to go. He's gone past being a poor leader, and now he's really damaging a brand. And when you start seeing not one but two but three different parties starting to pop up, that's everyone trying to do something a little bit different and trying to distance themselves from that brand. He needs to go, and he needs to allow a different leader to pop up. Caroline Elliott was doing a fundraiser for a bunch of the Tri-Cities, riding associations in which they'd already called for John's resignation. Esquimalt actually voted this last week to disband and collapse their BC Conservative Riding Association, and they've gone with the Christian Heritage Party, I believe it was. So, I mean, you got a whole bunch of different issues going on, and John just has to go.
Jonathan Kay said there's a Stephanie or Stephen Harper out there that can bring all the fractures back together. Because right now, what you just said, it is fracturing, and Eleanor Sturko, another strong voice as well, it is fracturing very much. And so where is Stephanie Harper or Stephen Harper?
And I would say the two names that I see quite prolifically, I know Gavin Dew is one of the ones that Maria will talk about later, but I think Caroline Elliott or Eleanor Sturko are two names where, they're well liked across a broad spectrum, but they're also well liked by the media, which is really important because it's part of what their job is and part of what they have to do.
I think both, I don't know the other one. I know Gavin and I know Eleanor. I've interviewed both of them, and both of them speak plainly, which I think is really key in this, like when you speak plainly, that's a big help. And I'm just going to leave it. The last thing, I'll just leave this on there, just a little bit of the smell left. Dan Elvis put this out there, and we'll just leave that smell there for the NDP because this is another one there. Dan Elvis says another leaked report showing 10,000 jobs lost because of the BC ferries. And that question is yet to be answered by either the Liberals or the NDP.
Very much so. Very much so. Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Renee. Again, great show. And again, we thank you for your time all the time and your experience and your thoughts on the matters that affect many Canadians.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.